All right, today we're diving into an analysis of the war in Ukraine that says if you're just watching the daily headlines, you're pretty much missing the real story. It claims that to really understand what's going on, you have to look at the entire global chessboard and a long-term strategy that was put in motion years ago. So let's break down the source's argument. So, this whole analysis kicks off with a really basic but powerful question. If you look past the day-to-day reports, the troop movements and the political speeches, what is the actual long-term strategy here? The source basically argues that if you're only looking at Ukraine, you're missing the forest for the trees. Okay, so how does the analysis reframe the whole conflict? Well, its first big point is that we are all measuring success completely wrong. It argues this isn't your typical war for territory. Nope. This is a grinding, brutal war of attrition, and in a war like that, the rules for winning are totally different. In this slide, right here, really gets to the core of what winning means according to this source. Conventionally, we look at a map, right? We see who's gaining ground. But the source says that's completely misleading. In a war of attrition, the real metrics aren't lines on a map. They're things like factory outputs, manpower reserves, and casualty rates. It's not about who holds the land today, it's about who has the industrial and human capacity to keep fighting tomorrow. This slide really nails that point home. The analysis claims Russia pretty much saw this kind of long, grinding conflict coming. It argues that while Western defense contractors are focused on profits, Russia's state-owned military enterprises were built for one thing: sheer production volume. The source contends this focus on mass production is exactly how Russia is managing to outpace the entire collective West in key areas like artillery shells and missiles. And in a war of attrition, that industrial engine, well, that becomes one of the most decisive weapons you have. Okay, so if the how is a war of attrition, then what's the why? This is where the analysis shifts its focus to the United States, pointing specifically to policy papers from the Rand Corporation that were written years before this conflict even started. And here it is, the core of the argument. The source posits that, from Washington's perspective, the primary objective was never actually a total victory for Ukraine. The goal, instead, was to draw Russia into a long, messy conflict that would force it to overextend itself and just bleed its military, economic, and political resources completely dry. This is the key piece of evidence the analysis presents. It's a direct quote from a 2019 Rand Corporation paper actually titled "Extending Russia." The source is basically saying, look, this isn't some hidden agenda, it's a stated strategy to put Russia in a position where it is forced to stretch itself to the breaking point on multiple fronts. The analysis calls this the overextension strategy. It draws a direct and frankly chilling parallel to the Soviet-Afghan War, a conflict that's widely credited with draining the USSR's resources and helping speed up its collapse. And the source highlights a really crucial detail. The original Rand paper itself acknowledged that going after Russia with this strategy would almost certainly come at a devastating cost to Ukraine. Now, here's where the perspective zooms out big time. The analysis argues that weakening Russia isn't even the final goal. It's presented as just one major move in a much larger geopolitical chess game. According to this analysis, weakening Russia is not the endgame, it's the setup. The bigger, long-term target is China. The whole strategy of bogging Russia down in Ukraine is framed as a critical step to neutralize a key ally and a crucial energy supplier to the one country Washington sees as its primary global competitor. The source claims this strategy unfolds in 3 simple steps. First, it alleges the U.S. is attacking Russian energy exports to cut off its revenue. Second, this directly hurts Russia's economy and its ability to fund the war. And third, and this is the key part, this creates a huge problem for China by weakening its most important energy supplier. A strategic vulnerability, the source notes, that has been identified in U.S. policy papers for years. So, if the conflict in Ukraine is about Russia, and the whole thing with Russia is about China, then what is the ultimate goal? The analysis frames it as a fundamental fight over the future of the world order itself. The source claims this strategy extends far beyond just Russia. It argues the U.S. is actively working to isolate other partners in the emerging multipolar world. That just means a world with multiple centers of power, not just one. It points to pressure on nations like Venezuela, Cuba, and Iran as part of this broader campaign to peel allies away from that Russia-China axis. So, what about Europe in this global chess match? Well, according to the source, Europe is not really an independent player, but is being moved into position like a pawn. The argument is that the US is encouraging Europe to take on the main role of confronting Russia, a move that would keep Moscow bogged down while freeing up American resources to focus on China and other parts of the board. So given this whole strategic framework, where does the analysis predict this is all headed? Let's take a look at its forecast for what's coming next. The source predicts a pretty clear timeline of escalation. It suggests the current phase of US-led strikes will keep going, while Europe is pressured into a more direct role, maybe even intercepting Russian energy shipments on the high seas. All of this, the analysis asserts, serves the ultimate long-term goal: dismantling any multipolar challenge in order to maintain US primacy. And that leads to a really stark conclusion. If the fundamental objective isn't just resolving a regional conflict but maintaining global dominance, then a negotiated peace becomes extremely difficult. The source argues you can't really negotiate with a party whose main goal is the subordination of its negotiating partner. And so, the analysis leaves us with one final, very provocative question. If it's correct, if the world stage is being set not for compromise, but for a zero-sum fight for total primacy, then what is the alternative? Is there another path, or is escalating conflict simply inevitable? That is the question at the very heart of this geopolitical analysis.